If your child attends an independent specialist school, or you think they might do in future, it's really important to understand what the government are proposing for this sector, because it could have a massive impact on which schools actually survive this process. Question 29 asks about regulation of independent specialist schools and whether we agree that the changes they're proposing will lead to sustainable placements being available at a fair cost. Now, this is a challenging area because there absolutely are independent specialist schools run by investment funds, ones that profit immensely from disabled children and don't provide a high quality education. And that needs to be stopped urgently. I personally am fully opposed to profit making in public services, so they should have me fully convinced on this topic, but they don't for a few reasons. So often these settings only exist because local authorities do not have enough specialist places. They've been actively encouraged to expand to accommodate more children because local authorities don't have the money to invest and there's been nowhere else for these children to go. Government says they'll introduce new legislation as soon as possible to limit the cost of independent specialist schools and expect the average fee will be lower from 2028. They also say they'll create new standards specifically for independent special schools, and their admission duties will be aligned with other specialist settings. They'll be required to offer placements based on the new specialist provision package in accordance with national funding bands, and they'll be required to report on costs. Also, the Secretary of State will have the power to refuse the expansion or opening of new independent specialist schools where there is little evidence of demand. The idea that independent special schools are opening where there is no demand is absolutely ridiculous. They are businesses. If they wouldn't be filled, why would they open? The consultation repeatedly highlights how much more expensive these placements are than local authority maintained provision. But there is a contradiction here because it also says in this section, many of these schools support children with low incidence, highly complex and extremely specialist needs. Of course, those placements are often more expensive than placements for children with more common or less costly needs. And of course, they charge more if they are for profit. This is the system that we have allowed to grow. It's also unclear whether they're comparing underlying placement costs or full packages, including all of the therapies and specialist provision that these children need, because many independent special schools bundle all of that together when quoting costs. For example, that cost might include a full-time one-to-one teaching assistant where that's needed, and that might not be factored into the cost of a maintained specialist school place, so we may not be looking at like-for-like figures. And while there are absolutely concerns about profiteering in some parts of the sector, when they talk about independent specialist schools, they are lumping in schools that are run by charities and non-profits, which by definition do not profit. Without some of these schools, many children would have had no education at all. So the obvious question is, if these placements become harder to access or they close because they can't do it within budget, where are these children going to go? The government will argue they can attend inclusion bases in mainstream schools, but they've already said that these schools often cater for very complex needs. For many of the children in these settings, mainstream will never allow proper integration into school life, which is something many of these children do experience in their specialist school. There are schools which support children and young people who could manage in mainstream that are very expensive, and I can absolutely see the issue there. But the price caps only seem to apply to independent schools. They don't mention maintained, so we have to make sure that the costs are reasonable and allow settings to actually operate. So for this question, I'll be basically saying that profiteering should be addressed, but without undermining genuinely specialist provision that is needed, and that funding comparisons distinguish between placement costs and provision. Children with the most complex needs must not be disproportionately affected by cost control measures, and suitable specialist capacity must exist before they introduce this so they don't restrict access to specialist placements for those who need them. Up next, we'll be looking at the question on supporting families to ensure system fairness. Follow for more. Check my YouTube playlist, which has all the videos in order so you can look at them while you're working through the form.